Okay, thank you very much. And I think the next topic that we have is really focusing on what we have already been talking about and what we can really see very nicely implemented in Fairphone. Because we want to talk about digital social innovation and the potential of it having changing the society. And I think, digitization changes the world we live in. This is not a question that we have. We're all having phones here. You're using an app to meet other people. We are traveling here with apps, and we can stay in touch with people all over the world. But the question is also, this is mostly a change which is driven by profit, right? Not by purpose. And the question is really, how can we use the new tools that we have in order to have a positive impact on society? And for this, we have three very, very, very interesting panelists who are actually already working on the forefront of digital social innovation. And we want to talk with them about how we can shape the future and what their experiences are and maybe the outlook on what's going to expect it in the next years. So first, I would like to call on the stage Dr. Nari Kahle from Volkswagen. Nari has been working on social innovation for the past 10 years as a head of social sustainability at the Volkswagen Group. And she wants to bring social innovation and social business in the world's #1 car manufacturer. And she has an X-Starter program where she inspires young people to be change makers in their own communities. So first, Nari, please come onto the stage. Thank you. So our second guest is Philip von der Wippe. Philip founded his first social startup when he was just 16, which is now 7 years ago. And his project is called Project Together. And since that time, Project Together has become the leading digital accelerator in Germany, where he helps and enhances other social entrepreneurs to become change makers in their own communities. Philip, thank you very much for being here. And our third guest is Professor Dr. Laura Marie Edinger-Schons, Chair of Corporate Social Responsibility from the University of Mannheim, which is actually the leading business school. And she's also co-founder of the first Digital Social Innovation Lab, where she enhances students to found their own digital social startups to tackle social problems such as homelessness, waste, or climate change. Laura, welcome to the stage. So you all work in the field of digital social innovation, and you use digitalization as a tool to tackle social or environmental problems. So my first question would be, Nari, what do you think as a global player like Volkswagen, why do you use digital social innovations, and what do you think is the outlook for companies or Volkswagen doing that?
Well, Manuel, thank you very much. I'm really thrilled to be here because, as I told you before, I started on the topic of social innovation about 10 years ago, and there was hardly anything going on, and now there's so many people up here, and I think that's quite brilliant. So thank you so much all for coming. And what I would like to say and give you as a food for thought is, I believe that digital social innovation really has some kind of magic in it, because when we focus on social innovation and all opportunities to find new solutions for existing social problems and combine that with what we have today of technology and digital, I think there are a lot of huge potential coming that are really able to change the kind of way that we're doing business today. And I think there's a lot of great potential to be found here, and also for corporations like us.
So Nari, you told me that you actually wrote your dissertation about social innovation 10 years ago. So I guess at that time it was quite hard to find data. And do you think that the outlook, especially of big corporations like Volkswagen, because I've heard some of you guys talking and not everybody was expecting Volkswagen to be so much engaged in this topic. Do you think the outlook of corporations like that has changed over the last years?
I think there's quite a big change going on, because about 10 years ago, what was well known was the whole topic of corporate social responsibility and, of course, philanthropy and charity, which is still a very important part. But what was not really up to that time on the date was how to combine social topics with the core business. And I think that is quite interesting, because now you have the possibility to really find new kinds of business models that are tackling social needs in a way that was not there before. And I remember when I was starting my PhD and I was Googling the topic of social innovation, and to be honest, there was hardly anything there. And it really increased exponentially, and there's so much going on, and therefore I can't really believe that there are so many new interesting topics, business models, social startups coming there. And I think there's a huge potential for corporations also to work together with new kinds of partners in new kinds of forms that maybe we haven't known before.
Thank you very much. So, Philip, this is, I think, a very good way to start the question to you, because you're in the business of bringing people together, right? You're in the business to have a platform where you help others to have an impact. So what do you think is the role that partnerships play to reach digital social innovation?
Yeah, it's most fundamentally, I think social entrepreneurship is oftentimes, or social innovation has oftentimes the focus on the entrepreneurs. But now what becomes more and more evident that it's equally part of the equation to have the big partners on board, probably from the beginning on. If we don't only think on a micro level, okay, that's a cool social startups, more sustainable than all the others, but if we really think about to make this the new status quo, right? So what do I mean by that is, how do we find a scalable process where those partnerships are not only a matter of luck, but that we really can we really can orchestrate those partnerships. So we should talk about not only the digital social innovations in itself, but also how much we can enhance the ecosystem by making it more digital. I think that's a discussion I want to have as well.
Very good, because I think this is also a good question that I have for Laura as the academic on the panel, because I know a lot of projects that you're doing at the chair of corporate social responsibility at the university is also working with different actors, right, from the state, from corporates. And do you think, as a university actor, do you actually have a benefit, and could you be a contributing factor of bringing people together to achieve digital social innovation? And maybe you have some example for us in the work that you're already doing.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me here. I actually think that the academic perspective is not only important because we research the topic and we try to find out about digital social innovation, but we can also be a platform to bring different actors together. So our intention at the beginning was that we saw that in Germany the whole discussion around digitalization was very much driven by negative aspects, so fears, how will the job market develop, and so on. And also what we saw in the Fairphone lecture, we saw that in the innovation field, everybody talks about the technical side of innovation and the positive potential, but not about the sustainability aspects. So we thought that it would be super interesting to bring these perspectives together to have a more positive outlook for the potential of digitalization. And we think that that has to start in education. So we have to start at the level where students learn about business models, and we have to show them the potential of digital technologies to actually revolutionize the business models that we see out there in the big corporations, right? So we started a couple of years ago, and now we have a portfolio of different programs. Maybe I can mention one that I'm also working together with SOC and BW. It's the Digital Social Innovation Lab. It's an incubator program for students who have ideas for social startups. So every semester we have 7 teams, 7 startups, and they actually develop ideas for how you can use new digital technologies to actually create a social or environmental benefit. Maybe one example, my favorite example, a student team that developed an app for homeless people. And this is something that I think we should more often keep in mind, that there are some groups that are sometimes neglected in this whole technology transformation, and technology can actually also benefit those neglected groups, right? So we had this team, they developed an app for homeless people to actually better manage their everyday lives, but also to, you know, manage their documents and to maybe find a way back into a normal life. And yeah, they had great success with the project so far, received a seed or an offer for a seed funding from the city of Mannheim, I think 20,000 euros. So I think this is a great example of how you can start at the level of students, bring different actors together and actually try to teach them the positive potential that we have to actually shape the developments.
That's amazing. But when we talk about all the potential that is there in digital social innovation, let's also talk about the pitfalls and the problems and the hindrances that we have. So Nari, I would like to know from you, what do you think could hinder digital social innovation, and what do you think is necessary to overcome these hindrances?
Well, first of all, I think there's, as I talked before, a great potential. And I think whenever we come together on a platform like this today, it's amazing because we can inspire each other, we can learn from each other. But there's one responsibility that I would like to address right now, because the more we are thinking about new kinds and new forms of digital social business models, and especially bringing together those two fields of digital and social, I think there's one kind of responsibility that I would like to ask and demand from each and every one of you also here. Because whenever we find new kinds of digital business models that may require less and less people, I do see a potential and a risk that we may not have enough jobs and employment opportunities for the future. And I do think that this could be some kind of responsibility that we, as the ones working on exactly some kinds of social innovation, social business models, would need to come up with. And therefore I would like to pledge that we have to take over some kind of responsibility so that we will not lose too many people of our society, and also think about a responsibility of taking up jobs in this field.
So do you think that this is going to be a major factor also in the field that you're working on in automotives in the next years?
I mean, as you're all aware, we are kind of in the middle of the transformation right now. So we are now more and more turning into electromobility, which is good. And it is really important that we do that right now. But there's also a but. If we look at the topic of electromobility, you are probably all aware of that electric vehicles are a lot less complex than traditional cars. Meaning, from an employment point of view, because I'm also being situated at the HR department, that you will need a lot less people for the future to build the cars. And there are a couple of fields where you have about 40 or even 60% potentially less people that you're requiring. So what do you do with the people? Because we don't want to let the people go, but also this is some kind of dilemma, of course, because we also need to think about productivity on the one side, but on the other side, I will and we are looking for new kinds of social business models to keep up with this problem. And if any one of you has a brilliant idea on what we can do, I would love to take over with that and talk about that, because I do think we have a responsibility here that we need to take on.
So, Philip, what do you think? Because first of all, what you're doing is a digital social innovation by itself, right? You're a digital platform that helps and enhances ideas of others for a better world. But do you think also this could be a contributing factor to tackle problems like employment, and also the question of social work integration and so on and so forth? But I mean, we are talking on a large scale. So do you think there are opportunities, or what kind of situations, what kind of architecture would we need to tackle these problems on a large scale?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, you mentioned technological unemployment, and I think technological unemployment is a perfect example of those challenges, which are first very complex, still very uncertain. They probably will increase. We still don't really feel it, and we don't have like good best practices from the past, really. So I think this is an example of many of those challenges, with the characteristics of uncertainty and urgency, but at the same time, no best practices yet. And I think that's exactly the vision I have for social entrepreneurs, understanding themselves in the position to test maybe hundreds of different approaches, because if we don't know we have to find out. And corporations like Volkswagen can never test 100 initiatives. I mean, if they fail 90 times, then it will be out of market. So we have to think about how can we, so first of all, how can we systematize this kind of de-risking of new approaches where like social entrepreneurs step in, and we need definitely more funding for that, because right now still entrepreneurs get punished if they fail, but maybe that's exactly their, in a systemic approach, that's maybe exactly their job to validate and test which approaches work and which not. And so I think that's where digital comes in, making it possible to compare many different approaches with each other. This is not possible yet. I mean, Volkswagen works on that probably, but there are so many initiatives all over Germany, all over Europe, working on this right now. And they make their experiences. They fail, sometimes they are more successful, sometimes they are not, but they're not connected, okay, that's first. But also, we still don't use technology and data to get a level of comparison which is really helpful. Because of course there are conferences talking about technological unemployment, and they exchange best practices, but this is on a high level, which is not useful, what I feel. We have to make it possible to get the feedback loop from concrete social initiatives back to kind of our abstract collective learning on a much deeper level of granularity. So that's my pledge for data and digital technology, because still, I mean, we all know, okay, we need collective impact, and we need testing, and we need a transfer from small initiatives to the big corporations. But the level of data we talk about is almost always only the highest level, and not on the level, okay, has this initiative based on Bochum and working with these 3 companies, did they validate something about a technological unemployment issue? For example, is it more about inspiring people who might lose their jobs to think about what else could they do? Is it about providing reskilling and retraining methods? Or is it about changing organizational and hierarchical structures? What are the biggest levers? And I think that we don't get to this granularity of comparativeness.
So, so I would think that maybe one question is also the ecosystems in which we work. And we had the EU Commission as a guest yesterday, where we talked about ecosystems. And now I would like to ask you, again, which ecosystems do you think digital social innovators need to thrive?
Maybe I can also link to the discussion before and bring in one additional aspect, because we're often talking about the company external ecosystems, but I think one really important point, and Nari, you mentioned it already, is also looking at the internal side of the company and how can the companies themselves transform, right? Because what I see also happening is that we see that social entrepreneurship is a huge trend. All companies want to have their accelerator programs, hackathons, and so on. Everybody's like advertising these things, but in many cases they try, for example, to help social ventures to solve problems out there. But I think the big lever is actually really in the production and in the business processes of the big multinational corporations. And I think some examples we already have where companies open up and where they say, you know, we want to learn from these processes, we bring in social innovators, and we try to actually transform ourselves. But there has to be an ecosystem in the company and a willingness to actually let this happen, right? Because it also means, for example, letting go of traditional hierarchical systems, empowering people, asking employees, what do you think? How could we make our company more sustainable? How could we innovate? And I think that is something that really needs a culture change in the big business. And as a chair, I can say, like from our perspective, we work with 50 different organizations, and there is such a variety of corporate cultures. Some are very traditional, very conservative, and they are really like taking small steps to look at the topic and see if they want to do something. And there are others that are grabbing the topic and using it for really like greenwashing tactics. But then there are companies that honestly try to learn from a stakeholder dialogue, bringing in young people, bringing in social entrepreneurs, and trying to look at their ideas. And then don't forget the own employees, right? They also have smart ideas. And some companies, I think, they are thinking too small in terms of what the potential of their own workforce is, right? So I think ecosystems, my point would be really also look into the companies themselves and create ecosystems that foster innovation inside the big companies.
Mm-hmm. I know, Laura, that you're also doing a lot of research about this topic, and as an academic on this panel, again, I think maybe you have a more neutral perspective on this, because, I mean, the whole summit is shaped around the digital future, and I think we're all enthusiastic about this topic, and definitely we can see a trend towards social innovation and social entrepreneurship. But in general terms, would you say that we see a development from where social innovation and social entrepreneurship is still a niche phenomenon, also within corporates, to become more mainstream? For example, when we talk about projects that we are going away from traditional CSR to the core part of businesses. So from an academic point of view, could you say that there's a development, or what is your outlook on that?
I have to say I am an optimist and I have a very positive outlook on these topics, which is also driven by some recent developments that I've seen in the field. And one development I think is really important. When I started to work on sustainability in 2011, everybody said, you know, if you're going to do that, you're never going to get a job. Don't do it. And since then, so many things have happened and so many positive things have happened. And I think what happened in companies is that now there is a duty to report on non-financial performance issues. We have new regulation, we have new social norms on how companies should act. What happens is that in the past we had this bubble in the company, a couple of people who are responsible for responsibility and sustainability, and suddenly the whole topic gets to a much higher level in the hierarchy. I mean, probably you can also report on this from your own experience, right? So suddenly the top management is actually interested in what do we actually do. So if I'm asked questions, what should I answer? And this creates a new pressure to act, which we didn't have a couple of years ago. And I think that is a very good momentum, but I think now it's also our job as social innovators, social entrepreneurs, and so on, to make the most of this momentum, right? Because there could also be times again when the economic, situation is not that favorable. And we also know that these topics are sometimes the first ones to be cut in terms of budgets. So I think we have a really good momentum at the moment, and I think we should try to make the most of it and try to really get at the heart of the business world.
That's really great. It's a great positive outlook. Natalie, is this something that, from a corporate perspective, you could confirm?
Yeah, 100%, because for the last few years it has been quite hard. Of course, a lot of sustainability topics have not really received the attention that they needed to have. But now more and more you have, I don't know, I'm always saying this beautiful word, Zeitgeist in German, because we really do see that there's some kind of shift, and it has a lot to do with sometimes a little bit of trends, but also a good momentum, but also CEOs and board members thinking about what is their purpose, what are they going to leaving behind whenever they may go on to a different organization or not be able to work any longer. And therefore it is really interesting because there is a societal need and a demand. So it would be really stupid to not really look into what is possible, because the beauty is there is so many amazing business models possible if you really think about that, and it has a lot of effects on society, but also on internal employees. Think also about motivation that you can have for your own employees if you show them what is possible. So there is a great beauty, but I would also say still the responsibility on our side to really think on that topic, as you mentioned, Laura, on a very broad level, a holistic level, to really integrate different kinds of stakeholders and especially your own employees. I would fully agree with that.
So we have talked about companies, we have talked about organizations. What actually about the public opinion? Because when you follow the public opinion about digitalization, general perspective is still focused on the dangers of digitalization. So Philip, do you think that there needs to be a mind shift for the general public also to realize the positive potentials? And if so, how we could reach that?
I think it's quite straightforward in the sense that we have to create the cases which just, and to create big cases which just make it very evident that they are improving not only the lives of the top 1%, but really improving the lives at scale. So, I mean, just to drop some examples, there's one venture we've been developing called Sitananda. They're kind of the first digital children, child keeping matching app, in a sense that they just realized the problem that at least in a short run, there won't be enough kitas, especially in the big cities, but also in the countryside, and that you can organize kita similar structures if you connect the right people, and they've been quite successful with that. But of course, those cases are still too small, and I think the cases are always the best evidence, because, and I think not only in terms of the discussion, is digital good or bad for society, but I mean on a larger scale. There's so much discourse in the last few weeks about what's the best narrative to counter populism, right? I mean, this is a question we're all asking after the recent elections in Germany. And my opinion is that you can, like, if you have, on the other side, if you have a fear-based narrative from the AfD, you will not be able to put out any abstract intellectual argument which convinces someone who is getting caught by the anger or fear-based argument, because fear is always stronger, although it's not based on evidence. So the negative rhetoric in this way is always stronger than the positive rhetoric if there's no evidence. So I think not only in terms of the digital, the only thing we can do is create very evident cases which speak for themselves. So I think this is something I hope from social entrepreneurs to tap in much more in the public discourse, saying no, everything is not getting worse. Actually, we are the best cases for proving that a positive outlook is not naive but very realistic.